Hello and welcome back to our draft series. John's back with me for another episode, and today we're going to be talking about Carson Beck. Beck's a guy that's been in college for a while, was actually originally committed to Florida, and this shows you how long he's been around. This was like in the Emory Jones class for Florida,
Oh,
like when
wow.
Beck decommitted, Jones went to Florida instead. This was like around the time Mullen was taking over, so like he has been around for a really long time in college,
Yeah.
but had the opportunity to play multiple years at Georgia, moved to Miami for his last year, and had a lot of success there. Miami had a great roster this past year, ended up making it to the national championship game. I think we'll unpack today, how much credit do we give to Beck for that versus some of the other parts of the offense. But yeah, looking forward to that today, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. And I actually didn't know he was from that class, but it makes sense because, like you said, he's been around for a long time. He's not super old, but he's on the older side as a prospect.
Yeah, and has played a lot of football for sure. He's
Yeah.
originally from Jacksonville, so from that part of the country. Beck's an interesting player because after his first year playing at Georgia, the anticipation was last year he was going to be the number one quarterback in the
Hmm.
class. This was before Cam Ward had fully exploded at Miami, so another guy that transferred to Miami for his last year of college football and had a lot of success. So Ward was still kind of on the back burner, waiting to explode at that point. And Beck had a pretty solid year at Georgia. And when you look at him, he does fit the prototype of what you would expect the number one pick to look like. He's 6'5", 233. I feel like you could basically say the same things about him as Mendoza, who is going to
Yeah.
be the number one pick this year. So you can understand why people were excited about him coming into his season 2 years ago.
Yeah. And to throw in there, he has 10-inch hands, which, like, I usually like look this up just out of curiosity and put it in my notes. And like most of the guys in this class have pretty standard hands, somewhere in the mid nines, but like
Yeah.
10-inch hands are huge. And really a little bit bigger than his like 6'5", 230 frame. Like that's like the bigger 6'6", 6'7" guys have the 10-inch hands. So definitely a really big guy. Played a lot of football, like you said, has almost 1,400 attempts, like Cade Klubnik. So like he's definitely been here, and at one point, has also had some success in college. So like you said, was perceived as like a potential number one pick a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Beck had a really promising first season at Georgia. The second year was a little more interesting. He
Yeah.
had some ups and downs, was a little more turnover prone. I remember the Florida game that year. He had 3 picks, and they were pretty rough, right? Like there was
Yeah.
some games where he struggled that year, and then on top of that, got hurt late in the season, and seemed to be not his teammates' favorite quarterback. Gunnar Stockton, the guy
Yeah.
who's now still at Georgia, returning for this season, seemed to have won over the locker room in that time when he also was, fighting extremely hard. I remember some plays in that SEC championship playoff run where he almost got his head knocked off too.
Yeah.
And I think the Georgia locker room had kind of moved on from Beck by the time that it was time for him to make his decision about entering the draft or coming back to college football for one more year. So he heads to the portal, ends up at Miami. I think the rep on Beck in that time period was like, this guy is a little immature and still has some growing up to do, still has some growing to do. It does seem like, based on the intel that's out there at this point, that people feel better about that at this point
Mhm.
going into his career, and that he did step into more of a leadership role in his time at Miami. So, a guy that has been in the spotlight for a while, had a lot of time to develop in college, both from a physical throwing perspective, but also from a mental perspective. And I think that makes him an interesting guy to talk about in this year's draft because it feels like a guy that we've been talking about for 3 years now.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about we can never really know like what went on in the locker
Yeah.
room, and especially like us, we're very much on the outside. We don't have sources with the program. You just kind of hear it trickle out through the media. It did seem like he kind of had that reputation at Georgia, but there was a lot more positive stuff coming out during the playoff run for Miami, where it seemed like he was working hard. like he was taking it very seriously. So
Yeah, and a guy at this point that knows the college game really well,
yeah,
I think was excited about getting into a new offensive system. We'll talk more about that system as we go today. So let's go ahead and get into Beck as a player. I think we started off with this, but we should again, set this as the foundation for him. This is a pretty prototypical NFL type guy. He's bigger. He also was a lot skinnier early in his career. He's added a
hmm
lot of weight to get to more of that prototypical frame where he was at Miami. He's a guy that's pretty comfortable in the pocket. He's not really looking to do much outside of that, and overall has a pretty solid arm, right? Like if you watch some of
yeah.
his best throws, you see nothing that's unbelievable, but a guy that you say, okay, he checks most of these initial boxes that you're looking for in a prospect.
Yeah. I want to talk about the weight thing for just a second. I think, I went back and watched a little bit at Georgia, and I think they wanted to run him more when he was leaner. I thought he was a little bit quicker then, but
Yeah.
he didn't blow me away as a runner. And then I thought he was playing better from the pocket when he was bigger at Miami. So I thought the weight gain was definitely a good thing for him. I think it fits his play style as a quarterback and like suits his strengths a little bit better. Like he really doesn't need to be lean to be able to run because he's never going to win with that in the NFL. But like from the pocket, I thought he was a lot better. And being 230 plus pounds is a good thing for him. Um, as far as like the arm strength, I think his size helps him over some of the guys we talked about with Klubnik and Nussmeier. I thought his arm was solid. It was good. Didn't blow me away. And I guess you kind of said that as well. Like, there's nothing there that's like the Drake May, the Caleb Williams special type throws, but definitely has enough arm to get it done.
Yeah, the comment you had on his size and him functioning in the pocket, I think is very true. He had a lot of opportunities. I thought it's funny. I just watched Aller as well. I think it shows up on both of their tape because of their size. Where there are times where he's able to kind of shake off pressure or a sack and get a throw off, and most guys just wouldn't be able to get enough velocity or arm strength on the ball to get it out. And Beck is able to do that. There's times where on he and Aller's tape where it may not be the best decision to throw the ball, but he has the ability to get throws off like that against pressure when guys are already latched onto him, which
Yeah.
most guys just don't have the ability to do. Yeah, I agree with your thoughts on the arm strength. Nothing crazy, but a pretty good arm. He doesn't have to always step into throws, especially shorter throws. It's pretty easy for him to kind of just stay flat-footed in the middle of the pocket and flick the ball out to guys. He doesn't have to do anything too crazy. We can get into a little more of like the accuracy and things like that later. But
Yeah.
I also thought, like you said, the running at Georgia, I saw a little more power from him as a runner. Like Miami used him more in like short yardage situations or like when they need to pick up a couple yards, which I do think is a better like projectable outcome for
Yeah.
him in the NFL. Like I think that will translate to some degree because of the size and he is not a statue back there. So I do think that's something as well that is probably better for him long term.
Definitely. And, kind of like we talked about with Klubnik, where Klubnik I thought was, obviously a more fluid athlete, but like he was pretty good as a scrambler. And I feel the same thing with Beck is like for his size, he moves a little bit better than what you might think immediately. Like he's not a statue, he's not completely immobile. And I thought he was best when he was able to break into open field as a scrambler and get upfield for a few yards. You mentioned the power. I thought that was definitely there as well. He's really not like a shifty athlete, but like he can definitely bring something of an element of that. So I don't think you want to design runs for him too often, and the type of runs are going to be like short yardage, like you said. But I do think he brings a little bit of that element. Um, yeah, sorry, go on. I had something else, but I'm going to have to
Yeah.
let it come back to me.
No, the only time I thought Miami really focused on designing runs with him was there was usually some kind of misdirection associated with it.
Yeah.
Like bringing Tony on a jet sweep, or they've got multiple guys in the backfield, and they're really trying to like free him up and pick up easy yards. It's not just relying on his athleticism to get them there, which I think was the right way to approach that.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thing about his mobility, I actually thought that he showed really good feel in the pocket. And like not like plus plus level, but like better than most guys coming out of college. I thought that he navigated the pocket really well, and used his mobility to actually find creases to stay in the pocket. And I think that
Yeah,
he's going to have to do that if he wants to succeed in the NFL. Like he's going to have to really live in the pocket. And good thing is he kind of showed the tendency to want to do that.
I agree with that. It I think his mindset toward it is very good, which is like, I'm not gonna just panic and try to escape. Like I'm gonna,
Yeah.
especially with how dominant their offensive line was, which is like something
Hmm.
you definitely have to consider in
Yeah.
evaluating him. With how strong their O line was across the board, he did a very good job of trusting them, and trusting that most of the time there's going to be somewhere for me to move to in the pocket that's still going to
Hmm.
allow me to get a throw off instead of trying to make something happen with his legs. So yeah, agree there. I think that is something that is a strength for him, but I am curious to see like when your
Yeah.
offensive line's not bigger and stronger than everybody else, does that still translate to the NFL?
Yeah. Good point.
Okay. I feel like I've hit most of the good things. That Miami runs so much mesh. I mean, it is like
Yeah.
all over the tape. I thought most of the time he was pretty comfortable with that, and like we said, he can, due to his size, he's able to like step up in the pocket on those plays and give his receivers time to break across the middle of the field
Yeah.
and hit them in stride. I thought overall he was pretty patient on those plays. And that allowed Miami to pick up a ton of easy yards without really ever having to put the ball in harm's way.
Yeah. Agreed. And I thought that he showed moments of being able to work through progressions and at times get to the backside read. He checked down some. I thought that he was better at that than like Klubnik, who we just watched,
Yeah,
where like Klubnik never checked down. It felt like, and Beck did at times. I think he still left some plays on the table there, where like he's kind of waiting for something to come open downfield. But overall, like with his process, I think he flashed some ability to do that. Um, Now I don't think he did that very consistently, and we'll
agreed.
get into like some of that I think ventures into the negative.
Yeah, you called out like the backside piece of it. I do think he's pretty confident throwing to the sideline. It felt to me like he was, I thought, more confident there and across like the short area of the field. And once you got
Hmm.
past that, the decision making starts to deteriorate. But he's a big enough guy and has the arm strength where like he's able to access those parts of the field fairly regularly. So I do think that's something that he has in his toolkit, and he's maybe not as limited as some other guys in that regard.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's everything I had on the positives. Anything else that you wanted to hit?
No, that covers it.
Okay, let's get into some of the negatives. The biggest, and I don't know if this is just a Georgia quarterback thing. Like I felt the same way about Stetson Bennett. I think the ball placement on his tape is awful. They
Yes,
run
I agree.
so, and by the way, they run so many screens. It is like you can watch. I feel like I had to watch 3 games of Beck to get the same amount of like real throws as some of the other guys. The Texas A&M game, it's like there's maybe 4 plays on tape that are like, oh, this is like a real NFL
Yeah.
play. But yeah, it's just all over the place, and it's like, what? I don't understand this. Like you've been in college for so long, you've got 10-inch hands. Like why can you not put the football where it needs to be on these screens? Like Malachi Tony's
Yeah.
such a good player where a lot of times it doesn't even matter, and he'll just figure something out. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
so many plays on tape where it just baffles me. Like it's a 10-yard throw, and we're making the receiver completely adjust and reset his momentum before he's able to get upfield.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway. And I think he's the least accurate guy that we've watched in this class. Like and maybe placement's the better word for it there, but also like the accuracy, I think was like there were times where he was missing wide open guys completely. And then other times I felt like it was very rare that he placed the ball where you want to place it on throws.
Yep.
And, you mentioned the screens, like that should be easy. There were a lot of times where those short area throws, like even if he's getting it to them, he was still missing the throw and like leaving yards on the table. One of my biggest takeaways from the Beck tape was like Malachi Tony is the real deal.
He's
Like
so good.
he was cooking guys constantly, and there were still times where Beck was like making him go down and pluck it off the ground, and he's still getting like 10 to 15 yards after the catch.
Yeah.
And like,
His yak ability on bad throws is like it's
yes,
crazy how fast he can reset and still get upfield.
yeah, yeah. I think he's going to be, when he comes out in a couple of years, like he's going to go really high
Yeah.
because he does kind of have the Tyreek skill set of like little guy, compact, but like built really well, really really quick and sudden in the open field, and like he was a big part of their offense for a reason this year. Even as a freshman, he was so good.
Yeah, the change of direction with him is nuts. Like how fast he gets
Yeah,
from like start stop, yeah, all that
yeah,
stuff. And this is where like we'll see it on one of the clips. I generally think his receivers bail him out far too
yes,
often for a guy that's supposed to be like a decent prospect. It's just there are plenty of plays on tape where if he was not surrounded by a really talented team, it would look so much worse. And I think that was part of why
yeah,
he struggled at Georgia the year before is that Georgia team wasn't as talented as other Georgia
yeah,
teams. And so when the talent started to be more of a level playing field in some of the games they played later in the season, even against a team like Florida who has enough talent to hang around if you're going to make mistakes, like things started to pop up more. And I still feel like that was the case with him at Miami, even if he probably was a little bit cleaner from the pocket overall.
yeah. I actually, I try to watch guys like I try to go look at their stat lines from games, and obviously stat line doesn't tell the story, but pick one where like, okay, this looks like just from the stats, maybe it was a better game. This looks like maybe you struggled a little bit more. This looks more like your average, and at least like kind of find a sampling of
Yeah.
their games across the board. I actually clicked into the Florida game, Florida Miami game this year without looking at his stat line, and I kind of expected it to be one of his better games just because Florida kind of
Yeah.
struggled at times this year. Um, and I remember getting like 3 or 4 series in, and it was not great, not exactly what I was expecting to see. So like, I think a lot of the Beck discourse is like it's really interesting because you have this guy who has prototypical size. He has a good enough arm. He has had success in the past, but I really don't think he improved through his time in college. Like I think as a passer, he was the entire time through he was just not very accurate. He's not a great passer, pure passer of the football, which is not great for a pocket guy.
And when you take that and you pair it with predetermination and poor
Hmm.
decision making, it's a tough recipe. And I think that's the other
Yes,
big concern
definitely.
with him. I thought the Indiana game, there were times where that was seemed like their entire goal was like they just wanted the picture to be cloudy for him. They mugged guys up at the line of scrimmage with their linebackers and were
Yeah.
just trying to give him a bunch of weird looks to hope that like he'll just throw one right at you. And he actually played solid in that game. Like it wasn't a horrible game for him or anything, but I think that was clearly one of his weaknesses. And when his guys didn't win, he didn't really change his play style. Like he was still
Hmm.
trying to force throws in. A lot of times I thought like much later than the ball should have been thrown. If he
Yep.
had if he had been on time, it might have just been a tough play for the DB or a potential catch. Instead, it turns into a potential turnover, and there's just way more on his tape than I was expecting based on how good Miami was this year. Like you just would, it's shocking how many times that happens for a team that made the national championship.
Yeah, he definitely locked in on receivers. I think to your point, probably predetermined before the play, like, okay, this is who I'm going to, and then he lock in on him and stare him down, and then throw the ball still. And sometimes he got bailed out by their good receiving talent, and a lot of times it went poorly. Sometimes led to picks. I said he made the DB's jobs a lot easier because he told them who he was going to throw the ball to, he waited and waited and waited and then still threw the ball. And
Yeah.
they're like the game ending interception in the national championship. That was the name of the game on that play. Like he was locked in on it. He waited and waited and waited and just threw the ball. And I mean, it was really easy. The corner undercut it, but also the safety was leaking over it. And like that ball was picked no matter what.
Yeah, there's way too many times he throws late over the middle of the field. You can get away with it a
Yeah.
little more on the perimeter, but there's just too many bodies around those receivers for the timing to be off on those plays, and you see it bite him plenty of times. I also just think it's a little scary to me how little they ask him to do. Like
Yeah.
I mean,
They
obviously their
paid
offensive,
$4 million for him or whatever last year.
yeah, their offensive line's great, obviously. So like they're gonna use them, and in the screen game, I mean, those guys can get out and move some people.
Yeah.
Especially Maui Noah, like on the right side, he's just such a good athlete on the move. So I completely understand why they did as much of that as they did. I also do think they clearly did not want him to have to win the game for them, and
Yeah.
they didn't need that. I mean, they almost won the national championship with it. So it's not a. I don't think they were making any sort of mistake from a coaching strategy side of things, but it does scare me a little bit that you just don't see it very much.
Yeah. Totally agree.
All right. Any other
I had,
concerns?
I had one other thing. I thought that like, we talked about his arm being pretty solid. I did think that the velocity kind of dies sometimes to the intermediate
Yeah.
boundary and also when he's on the run, um, which for a bigger guy, bigger frame, like you don't love that. He should be able to drive those balls a little bit better.
Agreed. On that note, like I thought the deep ball accuracy was not great, not terrible. It was like
Yeah.
he he misses a ton of throws by not very much. And it's hard to get a feel for how to interpret that, but there's just so many throws where it's like, oh man, like he that looked really good, but then it was just outside the receiver's outstretched arms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure how to interpret that, honestly. I don't think I give him credit for being a great deep ball thrower, but it also doesn't look like something to me that's completely broken or a guy that's just super erratic. So I wouldn't grade it as a plus for him, but I generally think my bigger concerns for like ball placement and accuracy are the short throwing more so than the deep ball.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that for sure.
Okay, I think my last note, and then we'll get into some clips. I think this speaks to the short accuracy. This speaks to overall lack of mobility. This speaks to decision making in tight windows. I did not think he was good in the red zone at all. And I think it's just
No.
naturally all of those things coming together. Like those are the things that you have to be good at to succeed in the red zone. But it does scare me. I think Miami was able to rely on their run game down there to get them into the end zone, but it's a struggle for him when he gets down there because all of those things he struggles with just become more important down there. And so that is something that I think affects the way you look at him.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into some clips here. I think I have a few clips here from the first game of the year against Notre Dame and then a few from the Florida State game as well. Let me know once you are able to see. All right.
All right. I can see that.
All right. This is an example of, I think, some of the positives you see from Beck and then also the Miami receivers bailing him out. So I think you get a couple things we've talked about on this play. This is a Malachi Tony touchdown here. So Beck drops back. Like we said here, he's pretty comfortable playing from the pocket here. And I think you see that here in his movement. He gets some pressure. He just slides his feet over to the left. He doesn't panic. He doesn't take off running. He doesn't pull a Cade Klubnik and run 90 degrees at the sideline as fast as he possibly can. He just plants and sets his feet. You see Tony's cooked his guy and got plenty of space, and he lets it rip. And he underthrows it, which Tony's adjustment on this ball, I think, is like crazy to just flatten out his route while the ball is in the air and get to this. But
He
to
does
me,
that a
this,
lot too.
yeah,
Tony does.
I mean, he comes back to the ball so well there
Yeah.
to end up getting a touchdown out of that. But you do see the positives from Beck here, where there's pressure coming, he just stays calm, resets his feet, and gives his guy a chance down the field to make a big play.
Yeah, I completely agree. This was one where it was like I felt the same way. Where you see some positives here. You see, as you mentioned, his ability to play from the pocket and like keep working, keep looking downfield, and then he misses. He misses the throw. It's accurate enough that Tony can come back to it and catch it. So I think this really encapsulates him as a prospect, where like he's able to do some of these high level things, but as a passer, he just leaves something to be desired overall.
All right, let's get into the next one. This is an example of the ball placement. This is just a quick screen. Miami's going to let the defensive lineman get through, and they're going to get out, and the play's dead. Well, this ball is so low, Tony can't even scoop it off the ground and make somebody miss. This ball bounces before it gets to Tony. There's just so much of this.
You notice what Tony is still almost able to do with it. Like if this had been just a couple of inches higher, he still got like 5 yards out of basically a dead play.
Yeah.
So
yeah, even with the like having to delay there, drop down, he makes the first guy miss. But there's just a lot of plays like that where it's like this is bizarre. Like this is the last guy where I should be seeing this. A quick clip there, but yeah, this is. Everybody's probably seen this play 5 times before with how good Miami was this year. I feel like they played this CJ Daniels catch every time. But again, I think this is a good example of what you'll see with Beck on his tape, which is here he's pressured. Again, like he hangs around in the pocket here, and then once pressure arrives, he tries to escape and get a throw off. This is a terrible decision. He chucks this up to Daniels, and Daniels makes a ridiculous one-handed catch here. But if you watch this, I mean, if Daniels does not make a crazy one-handed catch, and I jumped a little too far back here on the screen, but if Daniels doesn't make a crazy one-handed catch, this safety is catching this ball and running down the opposing sideline. This is a super dangerous throw at a time where you're probably just better off throwing the ball away at this point. Obviously, like crazy play results in a touchdown for Miami, but again, I credit the wide receiver here way more than I do the quarterback.
100%. And this was one where, like, if there was no pressure on this play, I understand. You see him cook he gets past the defender there enough that, like, I understand the window he's trying to throw into, but because of the pressure in his face, he really can't throw this ball the way it needs to be thrown. Like, you see him loft this one. It takes forever to get there, and that's why the safety's able to come down. If he was able to just throw from a clean pocket, maybe he can layer it just over the linebacker and fit this in before the safety can come down. But knowing that pressure is in his face, like, he should not throw this ball.
I agree. I think right here, if there's no defender, he pins this on like the 5-yard line, and it's a touchdown.
Good play, touchdown.
Yeah, it just floats for so long, and I think that speaks to some of the decision making where sometimes he doesn't have the best feel for when to just can it versus taking a risk. All right, couple of plays here from the Florida State game. The first one here is a positive from him where you see the arm strength and the accuracy. So play action, it's actually a flea flicker, which is why there's effectively no pressure from the defensive line. So he's got plenty of time. Anytime you see this is not a good sign for the defense. When Tony has this much head of steam built up, breaking away from the safety, that is not a good sign. And this is pretty, right? Like Beck puts it up there. He gets air under the ball. He is able to do that. Like he can throw with with plenty of air under the ball going deep. And in this case, hits Tony right in stride for a big play. Flea flicker here helps out a lot, but he delivers a great ball.
Yeah, this was one where, like, we talked about with Klubnik, like, didn't really feel like he was kind of a one-speed passer. I think Beck shows a little more ability to change speeds and puts plenty of air under this and lets Tony just go get it. This is a nice play.
All right, last one. This is a good example to me of the predetermination issues that Beck has. They're in a little bit of a bunch here, trying to create some space. He ends up deciding to throw this across the middle. first of all, this throws behind him, but
Hmm.
to me, and I jumped back a little too far again. This is an example to me where he just decides like I think this is my best shot and does not pay any mind to the fact that the corner plays this extremely well and drives down on this throw, and you end up with a tipped ball. No big interception here, but there's just times on these quicker throws where the decision making I wish was a little better at times, especially when you do have as good of an offensive line as Miami does. Here, you might have a chance to take this tight end up the seam. Tony's created plenty of space there on a little bit of a slant route. Like, I think he's got other options on this play if he takes another beat.
Yeah, and you've talked before about like the quarterbacks not checking their work. Like I think he sees the space that the receiver's going to run into and thinks, okay, that's good space. Like I can put it out there. Like you said, he's not really paying attention to how well the defender is playing the route. Like the defender's closing on that window is not really there. And then again, he misses the throw. Like
Yep.
he's throwing behind consistently on some of these middle of the field throws. So if he takes another beat, he probably could find the tight end up the sideline, and or again with him, he missed some check downs at times. Like he hit some of them, but there were some times where guys were running wide open underneath, and he was not looking at them at all. I'm not sure on that play as specifically. It's not up now, but like that was something that I saw a few times, and at least a couple times in the Notre Dame game, where it was like he's forcing stuff intermediate middle of the field, where he didn't check his work, and he's missing somebody wide open underneath.
Yeah, poor timing plus poor ball placement is not a great
Yeah,
recipe for throwing over the middle of the field.
yeah.
All right, let's move into comps. I can start this time. I'll start with my best case. For my best case, I had Mason Rudolph
That is
as
exactly who I have.
okay. That's pretty funny because that's not
Yeah,
like a huge name or anything, but
yeah,
I think that's like the level of player I would see as his ceiling, which is like a guy that's a potential spot starter, but like you never actually want to be your quarterback,
yep.
and really is only playing when you're looking for another guy. I think they both kind of fit the mold of a bigger guy, but are still limited players
Hmm.
in multiple aspects, and so the tools are not as great as you would imagine for a guy that's coming out of college that's 6'5", 230 pounds. Rudolph played a lot in college, so in that regard as well, it's a guy that like was older when he was coming out, more experienced. So that's my best case for him. This probably speaks a little bit to I don't see a ton of ceiling with Beck, but I do think there's a world where he sticks as a backup and has some chances to play at times.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was like going through other backup quarterbacks, but I think there is like that first and second cut of backup quarterbacks in the NFL where like they flashed at times where you think they might actually be a low end starter, but then as they play a little longer, it's like no, they're not really there. I don't even think he's got that type of ceiling. I think it's like with Mason Rudolph, every time he's played, it's like okay, this guy is he's not really good enough to play consistently. Like he's never really flashed at starting level. Bigger guy, limited, like you said, and also threw a good number of interceptions when he's played. Where like I think that's going to be a thing with Beck. Like if he plays, he's going to throw some picks. He might have some nice throws. He might end up generating a little bit of offense, but he's going to turn the ball over.
All right, do you have another one?
My worst case, honestly, I think with his really poor accuracy, I think there's a chance he's just out of the NFL in a
Agreed.
couple of years. I think that this is a lower floor than like a Klubnik who like flashed some tools that I think are a little bit better than Beck's.
Okay, so no, so basically we don't even need a worst case because
I think worst case
those
he's
guys are not in the NFL.
yeah,
Yeah, I went with Connor Cook as like a guy of
yeah,
like
yeah,
somebody took him in the mid rounds because he had a ton of success in college, just was never good enough, and was a bigger guy. So you're like, oh, maybe the prototypical size and the
yeah,
winning in college, all that kind of stuff will translate, and then you get to the NFL and like it's just not it's just not polished enough as a player from an accuracy, timing, all that type of stuff for him to have
I
any
think
chance
that's
to
a good point.
stick. So yeah, I mean it's you can pick whatever name it you want at that point of a guy that doesn't stick around in the NFL, but I do think that I have a hard time seeing a high ceiling with Beck, and I do think the floor is pretty low if he really struggles in his first couple years in terms of making decisions, and and the accuracy doesn't get any better. I don't think the player he is today is good enough to last in the NFL.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, John, what's your grade for Carson Beck?
I kind of thought about this one for a little bit, and I still don't know how comfortable I feel with this, but I kind of ended up with like a fifth round grade on him where like I think there's enough upside to get a spot starter, and those guys, I mean, at the end of the day, like that's still a guy that you're going to pay some money to in the NFL. So I think that's valuable to find in those later rounds. So like, I wouldn't have a problem drafting him there. Now, if people see less upside than that, you definitely are just going to treat him as like seventh round UDFA. Like he's not worth really much draft capital at all. But I kind of ended up with that fifth round grade on him.
Yeah, makes sense. I started with a fifth. I ended with a sixth. I think
Yeah.
that's where I've landed. I just think there's a lot. I think this guy. There's just so many inconsistencies that I think the road to getting to like his ceiling is just a long way. But I do think there's enough talent there and enough uh, like fluidness as a thrower, and you've got the
Yeah.
size, all that, you've got the experience. There's enough here where I do think it's worth getting him on your roster as a third quarterback that you hope develops into a solid backup. So yeah, I think he's draftable. I still am. We'll get to like some of. I'll get to a few other guys here in the process. I'm still kind of waiting for the guy in this bunch of later round guys that I'm like, oh, this is the guy I really like. Like this guy's underrated. I feel
The
like we
like
haven't.
third, fourth round, like there might be something here. Yeah.
Yeah, um, I'll have Drew Aller coming out after this video, so like you'll hear my thoughts on him as well. Another guy that's kind of in this mid to late round category, so he'll be coming up soon. But yeah, with Beck, it's just I have a hard time getting any higher than a mid day three pick because of so many of the inconsistencies that you see on his tape.
Yeah. Definitely considered that and can see it, understand it for sure.
All right, that'll do it for Carson Beck. Again, a guy that I think might stick in the NFL as a backup. Probably not a ton of ceiling outside of that. John, thanks again for joining.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I'll be back soon with a solo Drew Aller episode. Another guy that had a lot of hype coming into this year and didn't necessarily live up to what he was looking for. So that'll be an interesting one. We'll be back soon, and stay tuned for that.